woke up in the best mood. I am so excited to film this money Q&A. I love talking about money, and hopefully by talking about it a little bit more, we're making it less of a taboo topic because it is so important. So this marks my 1-year anniversary of starting a budget. I started July 1st of 2018, and I budgeted every single month since then, and it's been the best year money-wise. I feel better than I ever have in my life. And I was watching as some of these questions were coming in from Instagram, and I think you guys had fantastic questions, so I'm excited to answer them. The first thing I wanted to touch on really quick is that a few people asked if I was using specific templates or apps, and the app that I've been using for the past year is You Need a Budget, or YNAB for short, so I'll put a link to that in the description box below. But I have 2 other money videos on my channel. The first goes into the mindset of YNAB with the 4 rules, and then the second one is my 10 tips for sticking to a budget. Where were you the most surprised by the amounts once you started tracking? Don't have to think about that at all. It was food. I just would never have dreamed that 2 people, like that's all we have to worry about, could possibly spend that much on food. And it wasn't groceries or date night restaurants. I mean, it was a little bit, but it was really came down to those, I've had a long day at work and I don't feel like cooking, or hey, like what if I just bring home kava? Those kind of meals really added up to a quite shocking number at the end of the month, so that was definitely an eye-opening experience. Not a specific number, but I'm always interested in what percentages are going where. That's a good question. I know for a fact that our mortgage is right around 25% because we just we're working through a refinance right now. So I know that I would say how I have my budget broken down. Let me pull it up really quick. So the biggest chunk of my budget is immediate obligations, and that's everything from HOA dues, internet, gas, phones, mortgage, electric, water, giving, personal property tax, auto insurance, groceries, my pet, all that stuff. It comes in at a little bit over 50%. So if you have any specifics, I know again out of that, like the mortgage out of the entire budget is about 25%. Food is definitely, I think like what people recommend it to be like 10 to 15%, is a little bit over 15% still, even after we've cut back a lot. Before YNAB, how were your husband's and your ideas about money different? He has always been the saver. I've always been the spender as far back into our relationship as 11th grade. That's how it's always been. And I hated talking about money. It made me feel bad. It made me feel like I was on trial because as the spender, I was always the one ruining any kind of goals, like bringing the household down. So YNAB, and then before YNAB, he did everything, paid all the bills. I had nothing to do with anything. So this has been a complete change thanks to YNAB. I want to travel, but also want to save. How do I do that? Should I have 2 separate sheets? So I want to do the same thing. I want to save and I want to travel. I keep them on the same budget. I have 2 line items. My big savings goal for the year is that we wanted to set aside 6 months emergency fund in case of a job loss. So that's my savings goal. And in the app I use, YNAB, you can say, I want to save X amount of dollars by this date. And every single month it will tell you what you need to set aside. And I do the same exact thing for travel. Historically, over the past couple of years, we've taken 1 big trip and 1 small trip a year. So I've looked back and kind of did rough estimates of how much we normally spend, and I make that a goal. And then as I get paid, I put the money into the savings category and then the money into the traveling category. And that's what I love about budgeting, is that I have found that it's not restrictive at all. It's the opposite. If those 2 things, like me and you, like that's really important to us, to travel and to save, to have that security, then that's what your budget is. And then you get to have control over it and you get to tell your money exactly what you want it to do. We really need to do this. Tips for getting started. For me, it came kind of out of desperation a little bit. I just had gotten sick and tired of myself and like making excuses. So I decided that I wanted to find an app of some sort, and it was a sponsored post on a Cup of Joe. I wasn't even planning it. I just, in the back of my mind, I was like, at some point I'm gonna research apps. And she had done a sponsored post with YNAB, and I went to their website, I watched the little commercials they have about how it all works, and I was kind of intrigued. I am a reader deep down, and I saw that the creator of the app had written a book by the same title, You Need a Budget. So I have read it and listened to it, and I think doing that before I even bought into the program set me up for success, because I had that mindset going into it, and it put me into like an excited state of mind before creating that first budget. What was the biggest difference? Was it saving, investing, or spending habits? I'm gonna say savings, because pre-YNAB, Jeremy would say, well, we need to save, and there would just be this savings account floating out there, and I could never get excited about just sending money to it. But the second I put savings accounts names, new flooring, emergency fund, suddenly those things became real to me and I would get excited about them. I've wanted new floors for 3 years, so to be able to see progress every month, it became so much easier to actually save. How did you stick to the tracking? So if you're unfamiliar with YNAB, it really works the best and you're gonna get the most out of it if you are really consistent with the tracking. So as an example, if I'm on my way to work and I decide to stop in at Target and I spend $26 on groceries or snacks or whatever, as soon as I get back to my car, I'll pull out my phone, open up the app, and put that $26 has been spent out of the grocery category. This is important if you are doing the budget yourself, but especially if you're doing it with a significant other or your entire family. That way, the numbers in the budget are always accurate. So if Jeremy, at the end of the day, is coming home from work and decides to pull in at a grocery store to get stuff for dinner, he's not looking at our bank account, because it's so easy to look at a big number in a checking account and then overspend. But instead, if you can shift to looking at the app and knowing, hey, every single dollar in that checking account is designated for something, whether it be the mortgage or auto insurance, and I only have this amount left in the grocery category because Ashley spent $26 this morning. That, I think, is one of the biggest game changers with YNAB, and that kind of that scarcity mindset of realizing, hey, money has different jobs and this is what I've decided and this is what we purpose in our heart, this is what we're going to spend on groceries. Having that and letting it control your spending is going to help you achieve financial goals that much quicker. Best tip for paying down credit card debt. I saw this question come in, so I pulled this guy off of my bookshelf. This is Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. This is my original copy that we got when we went through a season of job loss years and years ago, and these are the original sticky tabs still from when I read it through the first time. This book, that is my best #1 tip. Also, there is an amazing debt-free community on YouTube. It will inspire you, it will give you so many ideas. And then my third thing, if I was doing it all over again, there is a free website called Untitled, and I see it talked about a lot in a lot of the personal finance forums. So I think that is a way to build your snowball and get you a little bit inspired as you see yourself making progress. So I will put links to everything I just mentioned down below. How do you feel now that you have financial control? Free? Empowered? This has been such a great year of learning about myself a little bit, to be honest, and growing. And then these money videos, they are definitely not the most watched on my channel, but the comments and the emails and messages I've gotten from people, and it doesn't have to be YNAB, that's just what worked for me. There are so many fantastic resources out there. It's just taking that first step of action. And from people who have done that and started taking control, that's by far been the most rewarding thing about my YouTube channel this past year. How do you decide how much to budget for emergency house car stuff? So I think that first budget, I Googled the square footage of my townhouse and the average maintenance costs, and that added that as a goal for the end of the year. And I just put money towards it each month. I think Dave Ramsey in his group, they call that a sinking fund, where you're not sure when you're gonna need to spend it. It's not like a bill that's coming due, but you know at some point things are gonna go wrong, and I am a testament to that. We have had to have all the trim replaced, a new roof, new siding. Just the other night I was cooking and Jeremy came in and we were talking, and the vent on the top of our microwave just came crashing to the ground. Never had an issue with the microwave all these years, so you know that was something to get the parts to replace that. And I already had the money in that home repair sinking fund, so we just easily pulled the money out of that to pay for that microwave part. So kind of do the same thing with cars. I looked up the average cost for maintaining both of our vehicles, added that as a goal, and I put money into it. And if we don't ever have to spend it, that's fantastic. I've had no issues, knock on wood, with my own car. Jer's had a lot, but we have that money that's just sitting there. And then if one day we decide to buy another car, like that's right there to either buy it outright or put a down payment or whatever. How much should you put aside to save, paying down credit cards, starting your own business? So I don't have any experience starting a business, but if I can find any resources, I'll put some links for you down below. But as for the other things, if you have credit card debt, that has to be the first thing. You will be so amazed if you can get those payments gone by how much further your paychecks can go towards your goals. So again, Dave Ramsey, I'm not sure if he still recommends the $1,000 emergency fund, but that's your first step. So if you're maybe single, $1,000 $3,000, I'm kind of a worrier, so I would probably increase that a little bit, but especially if you have a family, get that emergency fund, put all other goals aside, get that emergency fund of $1,000 or a few $1,000s, and once you have that, that just gives you a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of space if something happens, like a car breaks down, and then everything else should go to paying down that credit card debt. So again, I'll put Dave Ramsey's book linked down below. How do you stick with it? I have a whole video dedicated to this. I think I titled it My Top 10 Tips for Sticking to a Budget or something like that, but it really boils down to just making it a part of your everyday life. It's a part of my morning routine to sit down and to reconcile all my accounts so that I know that everything is up to date in my budget and that everything matches both my bank account and my credit cards. So I just made it a part of my life, and I feel like once you start reaping the benefits, and that can be different for everybody. For me, maybe it's the new floors. Like every time I see it, I'm thinking, wow, we saved that and we paid for it and it looks beautiful. And then when you start seeing your savings or investments growing, I think you kind of start chasing those good feelings, and that makes it easy to stick with it. How do you plan for big expenses like trips that are budget outliers? I break them up into manageable amounts. So I'll start with, hey, I'd really like to go to Italy in the summer of 2020. So I'll do some research, look at different places, kind of get a rough budget in mind, and I'll set that in YNAB. And that's one of my favorite things about the program, is that it will break it down into monthly goals for you. So it'll say you need to set aside $100 out of every paycheck to be able to afford this trip in a year. So I love that. And I do the same with Christmas. I say, well, I know I spend about X amount of dollars every November and December. So I set aside money throughout the year. I've always loved Christmas. I love gift giving, and it's just made it that much more fun without having to stress about where money is going to come from. It's already been fully funded for a while. Tips for non-consistent income. We both have regular 9-to-5 jobs, but I thought about this some, and I've also read about it. And I think what I would do is I would look at my budget and cut out all the fluff. So you're cutting out things like Netflix and leaving things like your mortgage and auto insurance and food, things you absolutely need and that are necessities. So once you cut everything down, you'll get a number, and let's just, for an example, say it's $3,000. So then in my regular budget, I would create a new savings category and call it something like my buffer. And you would want to get 3 to 6 months of that $3,000 to help smooth things out. And then I would cut out all other savings or investing goals and just work on filling up that buffer. And then that way, if you have a month like worst case scenario, you make $0, you know you have that buffer to get you through. And then when you get that next big paycheck, you can always pay back the buffer. So that's kind of what I would do. I think there's a really good article maybe on the YNAB blog I read once. So if I can find it, I will put it down below for you. Best books to start. This kind of all began with reading Jesse Mecham's You Need a Budget, so that one's near and dear to my heart, and I would recommend it. If you have debt to get through, Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover, and then a newer book that I'm just about finished with and have been really enjoying, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. The author was interviewed on Matt D'Avella's YouTube channel. The interview was so interesting to me that I bought the book, and I've been really enjoying it. It's a 6-week kind of money makeover, and at the end of every chapter there are action items, so this was great. And then if you are past a lot of the basics and you're really working on growing your net worth, J.L. Collins' The Simple Path to Wealth. That book was awesome. It's one I'm definitely going to read again. It got me excited about the stock market. You don't even have to get the book from the library or buy it. I think most of that information is on his website with a blog series entitled, I think it's called The Stock Series. What's been something new that you've learned about yourself by learning to budget? I think that would be that I really like money. I mean, coming from somebody who never wanted to talk about it, I never wanted to read about it, to where it takes up a huge portion of like my brain space now. And I think honestly, if I was going back to school tomorrow, it would be something involving money. So you could never have told me this last year that I would be into money this much and have me believe it, but that is kind of a side effect of budgeting. How do you balance fun money versus saving? It's hard to know when to say no or yes. This is a great question. You know, I don't have a frugal bone in my body. It's just not in me. But something where I think spenders and savers alike can come together is value-based spending. So knowing what is important to you, maybe that travel, or maybe that's preparing really amazing meals for your family and knowing that that's what's important to you, and then that's where your money's going. And I think if you get out of mindless spending, which is a trap that I had fallen into, like, don't feel great today, buy a new lipstick. Don't feel that wonderful about myself, hey, maybe a new top will help. If you can get that out of your life, that mindless spending, and focus on things that are really important, and maybe it is a new lipstick, but you're thinking about it and not just reactively buying it, that leaves you so much more space in your budget for things that are truly important. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's kind of my first stab at it. How many bank accounts should you have? How much do you put away for retirement? If you watch a lot of the debt-free community videos, which I love, that's like my favorite thing right now to have on in the background, a lot of them have, I want to say it's bank accounts with Capital One, because they let you have as many tiny little savings accounts as you want without any kind of fee. So that's one way to do it. And then you could say, hey, this is my travel fund, this is my a down payment for a new home fund. I myself, I have one checking account and one savings account, and I just let those be lump sums because all of that money has a job in my budget. So even though it doesn't look like anything to the bank, to me, I know that, hey, this is set aside for this is set aside for that. And I think that's a real game changer, is when, no matter what kind of app or spreadsheet that you're using, having it be a zero-based budget, meaning every single dollar has a job. That's where the magic is. How do you stop yourself from makeup and skincare impulse buys? This is the hardest thing. I totally get that, and I've been there. For me, it's creating a wish list. So if I want something, I think, ooh, that lipstick is beautiful, like a new Lisa Eldridge lipstick, I will put it on the wish list, whether that I have one in Google Docs and I have one in my planner, and I think about it for 2 days. There's nothing really magic about 2 days. It can be however, like whatever the time period that you want it to be. I know some people, if they're walking through the mall and see something that they want, they wait until the very end and to see if they still want it. So just whatever works for you. But basically, you just want to put a little bit of time, for me 2 days, in between wanting something and actually buying it. You would be so surprised if I pulled up my Google Docs, how many things, like, I'm like, oh, after 2 days, oh, I kind of already forgot about that or whatever. And then there's been other things like this necklace from Majuri. That was something that went on the wish list, and a couple days later, I still really wanted it. And I even let this sit, I think, for an entire month on my wish list because it was a little bit more expensive, and I still really wanted it at the end. I bought it. I had no regrets whatsoever, and I love and I wear it all the time. So really, that putting a little bit of space between that initial one and then buying it, I think that will really help with any kind of impulse buys. Although I'm definitely not perfect and can still fall into the trap, but that has been a huge help. Which area of spending was the hardest to keep under budget? Far and away food. It's something that we are still working on. Let me just pull this up. An app called AnyList. Jer has really taken to putting all of our recipes into one place and keeping all the grocery lists there. That's been a huge help so far. We still have very far way to go, but we have been making progress. Do you handle all the finances? Was your husband enthusiastic about using YNAB? So if you watch that first money video, this is how this all came to be, is that he always handled all the money. And in 2017, he started traveling a little bit more for work. And then in 2018, he traveled so much. And I started to feel like it was kind of a lot for him to be overseas and still having to deal with all of our paying all the bills and having to deal with all of that kind of stuff. And so that's when I decided I wanted to take on a little bit of the responsibility, found YNAB, and then the rest is history. And now I do a lot of the bill payment, but it's a lot more spread out evenly, which I think is what works the best for us, and it makes it feel like we're on a team and that we're working towards goals together. And I think at first he was like, oh, because it's $84. I think YNAB is $83 or $84 a year. And he was like, because I think you thought that there was no way I was going to keep up with it. But I saw that they had a student program, and he was in school at the time, and you got your first year free. So we're coming up, I'm going to have to pay for the first time at the end of this month. So I think for it being for free, and he was like, kind of like, whatever, try it, see if you like it. And when he saw how much progress we had been making, he got really into it, and now he does a great job of, if he's out and about and spends something at Home Depot or the grocery store, he'll go in and input it himself. So that is fantastic. No question, but thanks for recommending. YNAB helped me double our net worth in 6 months. That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing, and congratulations. The next question is, talk about upping credit scores and why they are important. And this was actually from my sister. She helped me so much. So remember, in history, I came from the Dave Ramsey camp, which I'm grateful for. That was such a stressful time of my life, and I'm so grateful to him for his principles, but it left me with this fear of credit cards. So I basically, that was years and years ago. So I basically had no credit score to speak of. When I got more into personal finance and financial independence, a huge tenet is traveling the world with points and miles, and I wanted in on it. I heard about these amazing trips, and they were all having these premium travel rewards credit cards that you needed specific scores in order to get. So I talked about it with my sister. First step was setting me up on Credit Karma to get a lay of the land, and then I got a really basic credit card. I think it was the Capital One, can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it had a really small limit, and I just put a couple things on it and then paid it off immediately. And that's my favorite thing about credit cards and YNAB, is that I know I can do whatever spending on a credit card without worrying about it, because it works so well with YNAB that I have automatic payments set on all my credit cards, because I know that money is going to be there when it needs to be. So I got my credit score up like 50 some points. It made it, Dave Ramsey, he has so much money, he doesn't have to worry about a mortgage. But when we refinanced, having that higher credit score helped me get a better interest rate on our mortgage. So that was huge. So it's been fantastic overall. And the travel rewards credit card I really wanted was the Chase Sapphire Reserve, which I have, and I've gotten the bonus for that one. And then I also have a United card, and I've gotten 2 bonuses. So I'm starting to build up points and miles. When you and Jared moved in together, did you get a joint checking account or have separate? So our money has always been one since day one, and I guess that's just how our parents modeled it for us. I didn't even think that there was anything different, but of course, since being in all this personal finance and reading in all the forums, I realized that a lot of people keep it separate, and I don't even know how it shakes out, if it's like 50-50 versus people who do or don't, whatever. And if you do keep it separate, I did read a really great post once about how they have separate accounts, but they have a joint home account that gets paid into every month, whether you set it as like a total or like a percentage of what you make gets put into this account. And then that's where you pay things like rent and utilities. I sent it to a friend who kept things separate because I thought it might help her. So I'll find that email and I'll put a link to that down below. Has this helped you save specifically for retirement savings? Oh, that reminds me, I think I missed, there was like a 2-part question, and the end part was about retirement, and I skipped over that. Yes, it has. Jeremy's on track this year to max out his 401k at work, which is $19,500, I think is the limit. And then I myself am putting 5% in, and then I also opened up a Roth IRA, and the limit on a Roth, I want to say, is $6,000, and that's my goal, is to fully fund that by the end of the year. Are you pursuing FI now? FI stands for financial independence. What strategies are you implementing after listening to ChooseFI? So if you're not familiar, ChooseFI is a really popular podcast, and after reading and listening to the YNAB book and budgeting for a while, I listened to all their podcast episodes. They're really short and like easy to get through, and it was so motivating in the beginning, and I was bummed when I finished it. And somebody in a YNAB fan group asked for podcast recommendations, and the top result was ChooseFI, so I decided to give it a go. Honestly, I thought it had something to do with Marines like Semper Fi, but Brad and Jonathan have weirdly become, like, I feel like they're friends. Like, since last fall, I have just powered through that podcast, and I listen to it if I'm going on a walk, or most mornings when I'm going to work, I'll listen to a little bit of it. And I don't think it would be so hard for you to listen to that podcast, hear the amazing stories of people who have reached financial independence, and hear the excitement in just like the most genuine, they just seem like genuine people. It'd be really hard to listen to it and not take some kind of action. So yes, I have taken steps. I mean, we're so far, I mean, we would have to increase our savings rate a lot, but it is something that we want to work toward. And I think maybe not like the retire early part, but the financial independence, to be able to have money in the bank where you're not worried, you don't have to be concerned with a paycheck in order to live. That would be incredible. So yes, I love ChooseFI so much. I'm going to be so sad when I finish out the podcast. I think I have 4 episodes left to be able to be completely caught up. And then the next podcast, I'm taking any kind of recommendations you guys would leave, but I'm thinking of starting at the beginning, Paula Pants, Afford Anything, and then working my way through that. Next 2 questions both have to do with investing. Are you doing any investing? What do you recommend for investing? How much do you set aside? Any tips you have? JL Collins, like, that is where I would start if you want to get serious about this, and his stock series. I myself, I feel like when I got started listening to ChooseFI, they always recommend VTSAX through Vanguard, that mutual fund. I feel like there must have been a cap, like some kind of barrier of entrance, and I was working with small beans, so I didn't have enough to do that. So I began with VTI, which is the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF. I believe. If I misspeak at all, please check the description box. I'm hoping to have lots of information down there. But that's where I've been investing in a taxable account. Right now, we're really working on building up that emergency fund, or not the emergency fund, the job loss category, where it's like 6 months of expenses set aside. So that's where all my savings goals are going right now. But as soon as I have that, I'm gonna get a little bit more into investing. So maybe I'll be able to talk about that more in a future video. How did you determine how much to allocate to each area of your budget? I did that by going back in time. I pulled up my bank statements and I went back 3 or 4 months, and I just broke down how much we were spending on entertainment, food, everything like that, and that helped give me a rough estimate of where I needed to set all of those budget categories. More that I've struggled to set up YNAB. How do you stay on top of it? So the YNAB setup, like, it can feel very overwhelming. I watched a lot of the classes and I watched a lot of videos on YouTube, and at this time I don't think his videos were up because I feel like I would have had to have seen him. But there is a YouTuber, I believe his name is Nick True and his moniker is Mapped Out Money. He has a fan following and he does a lot of YNAB setup guides, and people have said, like, that's like watching his videos is when they had that light bulb moment of like, now I get it. Now I get the beauty of YNAB. So I think Nick's video, if you are just feeling overwhelmed on where to start, he has a basic setup guide. He has one for starting your budget in the middle of the month. He has a really good one on how YNAB works with credit cards. So I'll put a link to Nick, some of his most helpful videos down below. I just hit my 1-year debt-free and investing anniversary too. Congrats. That is fantastic. I love getting messages. I love just being able to talk about money. I had such shame regarding money. So to sit here and not feel any of that right now, just 1 year later, that is fantastic and freeing and just the best feeling in the world. So if you've watched to this point of the video, I figure either you must be really into the topic of money and saving and investing and budgeting, or you just put me on in the background while you cleaned, and that's fine. I don't mind. I like to be a part of your day-to-day life no matter what. But I would love to pay it forward a little bit and give away a 1-year YNAB subscription. So I'm gonna make it super simple to enter. All you have to do in a comment down below is leave me one financial goal you have. It can be something small, it can be something huge. I would love to read it, and I think it would be really inspiring. So I'll have any kind of details about the cutoff, things like that down below. But thank you so much for watching. I hope this video brought some value to you, and I'll be back with a new video very soon.